Today it's TPA Talks. Welcome. I'm Lala, and here is
Tabitha, the best.
So today we will be interviewing Mr.
Charles Griggs.
For Durkeeville. We're celebrating the history, and also it's Black History Month.
Black History Month.
So, let's clap to that. And we're gonna start off with asking Mr. Charles a few questions. First it'll be me, then Tabitha. So I'll start. What's your name and what do you do?
Well, my name is Charles Griggs, and currently I serve as the Director of Community Initiatives for Mayor Donna Deegan.
Oh, wow, really?
And,
That's really cool.
And that's what I do. I mean, my job is to help coordinate community initiatives, and especially in the area of helping our community be safe.
Well, that's a wonderful job.
That's a wonderful job.
It is. It's a lot of fun.
How old were you when you started living in Durkeeville?
Well, I've been in Durkeeville pretty much virtually. Well, I started out when I was a baby. My parents lived with my grandmother on 8th and Whitner, right near 8th and Myrtle, which is near J.P. Small Park. And they lived there for, I think, about a year and a half in my grandmother's house until they moved out into an apartment. And then later, when my parents broke up, I started living back with my grandmother with my mom. And my entire childhood was spent at that point in Durkeeville, frequenting the area. You know, I used to get my hair cut on Myrtle Avenue. We used to play in what was then known as Myrtle Avenue Ballpark. We know it as J.P. Small Park now. Enjoyed, I used to wash my clothes at the laundromat there on 8th and Myrtle. So very rich history up there, and spent, like I said, spent all of my childhood up there.
How long did you live there?
I would probably say out of the 17 years before I left to go off to school after graduation, I lived there probably all of them except 2 years, so probably about 15 years or so.
That's not too long, but not too short.
Yeah, but I also visited my friends, returning back to the community, and so it's like I never left. Yeah, I would say. I stayed pretty much connected to the community even after my grandmother passed away, and would visit, and I still had my old friends living in the neighborhood, and I would visit them as well.
What schools did you go to?
So my elementary school, I attended Mount Herman, which is down the street on 8th Street near Davis. Then it was a railroad track there. There's no longer a railroad track there. It's a walking path towards Emmett Reed. Mount Herman is right behind the walking path. And then I'm transferred. This was before integration. So in the 5th grade, I attended R.V. Daniels, which was on the other side of 13th Street. And then the following year, in 6th grade, was the beginning of integration, and when we were integrated with white students in our community. So I moved one school over from R.V. Daniels to Susie Talbert, and that was the first year that I experienced integration in the 6th grade. And at the time, we had most of the students in our class, even though the school was located in the black community, most of the students at Susie Talbert were white students who were bused from Arlington. And so we had just a few. Then I left Susie Talbert. We called it a 7th grade center at James Weldon. So went to James Weldon. It was a 7th grade center. It wasn't a college prep yet. It was just a 7th grade center. So you went there for 7th grade only. Then the following year, we used to have what we call junior high schools. 7th and 8th grade schools were junior high schools, and I attended Lakeshore. I was bused. This was the first time I experienced busing. So I was bused based on the beginning of my first letter of my last name. And there were 2 schools, well, 3 junior high schools, or 4 junior high schools that students attended. Lakeshore, Stillwell, Jeff Davis, and Jeb Stewart. And so folks were bused based on their last name. The other junior high schools were walking schools, so to speak. So students who live in those communities were able to walk to those schools. Southside Junior High, and I think Landon Junior High was as well. Then for high school, again, because of my last name beginning with a G, I attended Inglewood, and I was bused there as well. Most of the students in my community who lived in my neighborhood, there was a common bus stop at the corner of 8th and Myrtle. And so, we would see all of us catch our buses in the same location. So my best friend who lived next door to me, his last name began with an M, so he was assigned to Sandalwood. But we would walk to the corner together in the mornings, where a guy who lived across the street, his last name began with a C, so he attended Robert E. Lee. And again, all of us would go to that hub in the morning and get on our respective buses and go to our schools. And that's where I graduated from Inglewood High School.
That's great.
That's awesome. I actually go to Jeb Stewart. They changed the name of it.
Yep.
But yeah, that's the middle school that I go to.
Yeah. It was an interesting time because the schools that were located, in particular on the west side, students weren't very friendly to students coming from the north side of the town. Based upon and it was really, in a lot of cases, it was more the parents than the students, and the students were basically following
their
parents' mindset.
Yeah.
But a lot of rebel flags and things like that greeted us when we got there, and a lot of parents were still upset that black students were going to the same school as white students at the time.
Mm-hmm. So overall, what was your experience
in school? Yeah, I would say that I had a positive experience. I often tell people that busing was good to me because it allowed me an opportunity to have a break between school and home. Mm-hmm. I was notorious for finding or using that opportunity to do my homework. I would do my homework on the bus on the way home and kind of review it on the way to school. What I would do is for each one of my core classes, I would get a teacher to assign me an extra book. And I'd leave that book at home and have one book in my locker. And that way I never had to carry any books. I just walk around with folded papers in my hand, and I do my assignments when I get home, check them on the bus, and I never had to carry these, the big heavy books around. And in fact, there was one of my buddies in high school. He just couldn't understand how I could be such a good student. I mean, I was making A's and B's in every class. He said, "I never see you carry any books. How do you make these good grades? You never carry any books." And I never would disclose to people how I did that, but I would talk my teachers into providing me with an extra book aside from the one that I had been assigned, and I would use that as a resource at home to do the homework.
I feel like that's good, so you can get it done,
right? And
you can always move on to the next, assignment. So it's easier. And when you're doing it on the bus, it's like you're still getting the extra work done, and you're studying for it. So it's not like you're worried or anxious about it.
Yeah, my motivation was a little more than that because I was involved in extracurricular activities. I started playing in the band when I was in the 7th grade. So in junior high school, the band at Lakeshore was very active, and we did a lot of fun stuff. And I did not want my activities to be curtailed because I hadn't done my schoolwork. Exactly. So I tried to stay out in front of that. And it was the same thing in high school. I was in the band, but I also played basketball and then later football. And I didn't want that to be the reason why I wasn't going to be able to play in the game. Especially in high school when I played basketball, our coach, he had a standard that was higher than what you're actually allowed for being able to participate on a basketball team. He wouldn't allow you to participate in a game or in practice if your GPA was below 3.0. So you had to carry a 3.0 GPA. And not only was that standard an individual standard, but it was a team standard. So if we knew of another teammate who was carrying a 2.5 or whatever, it was the responsibility of the other teammates to help that other student, the other player, bring his grades up so he could participate.
Mm-hmm. What did you do growing up, and what was popular around that time?
My buddies in my neighborhood, we were all big music fans and sports fans. That's all we did was listen to music and play sports. All we did was listen to, if it wasn't the radio, somebody had the latest Earth, Wind and Fire album or Parliament Funkadelic album. And I remember at the age of 13, it was the very first time I went to a concert. We all went as a group. It was a bunch of guys. And if you're familiar with the Fat Albert and the Cosby Kids, that was us. It was just a group of guys, kind of meandering around the neighborhood at each other's homes because our parents made sure that their homes were safe spaces for each of us. So we could end up at any one of our parents' homes on the stoop. Mainly, we didn't really play inside of each other's houses, but we would sit on the porch or play out in the yard, that kind of thing. And then on Saturdays or Sundays, we would go to the park on 13th and Whitner. It's where St. Pius, the St. Pius Catholic School is. We used to call it the Catholic Park. But we would go up there and we would play basketball, football, and baseball. Depending on what season it was, we had a neighborhood team. And so we would play against other neighborhoods,
Wow.
and that's how everybody operated. So it was a lot of engagement. And so between playing sports and listening to the Commodores and Earth, Wind and Fire and all of those groups, that's all we did. I mean, that was a lot of fun, and we pretty much stayed out of trouble. People were too busy having fun to get in trouble. All of us ended up getting 10-speed bicycles because that was a big thing when they first sort of came out. 10-speed bicycle, that was a big deal. We would all figure out a way to ride our bicycles together. We would pick a destination, and it wouldn't even be that far, maybe 2 or 3 miles, and we'd ride, to someone else's neighborhood park and ride back. And then during the summers, as we got older, we would find an open gym and play basketball at those gyms, like Darnell Cookman or Emmett Reed. And we would get up there probably around 11 o'clock in the morning. We wouldn't leave until 6, 7, 8 o'clock at night. Just finding a way to kind of stay activated, throughout the day.
Okay. Yeah. Were there ever any community events?
Oh, yeah, certainly. At what we now know as JP Small Park, every year in the early 70s, they used to have this event. The radio station used to put it on called Come Together Day.
Oh, wow.
And it was they would bring this flatbed truck out there. They'd use the flatbed on the back and big tall speakers, and all these local bands would come out and perform. And all of them had musicians. They were bands. The bands would be competitive. So you had horn players and drummers and, all of these bands would be like 7, 8 bands, all of them playing throughout the day. And then they would have like maybe one celebrity who you've heard on the radio before. But for the most part, it was local bands. And that was, bands like Cracked Mirror and Kudu. You hear those names over. Those were bands that we would hear about. They were playing in local spots around town, but everybody would love it. The horns would be blaring, and you could hear the music for blocks. The cars were parked around all around the park, and us, as little kids, we would find a way to sneak into the event so we wouldn't have to pay, the $1 or $2 to get in. Outside of that, they used to have baseball games up at JP Small Park, and as well as other events. There was always a church doing some type of outing that you participate in. They wouldn't just relegate that to their congregation. And you could go to Disney World or Six Gun Territory or to a lake or whatever, because the church was sponsoring this trip. And they would make, members of the congregation would, spread the word and invite, bring a friend, that kind of thing. And that's how people kind of, congregated and came together. But yeah, and we do the traditional concerts as well. Like I mentioned, the first concert I attended was with my neighborhood buddies. We all went to see the Spinners. And it was cool because as someone in the band at Lake Shore at the time, the national bands or a group like the Spinners, they perform with an orchestra.
Oh, wow.
And so they wouldn't travel with the orchestra. What they would do is they have a director, a music director. The music director would come into town and audition or hire local musicians to play in the orchestra. And my band director was actually playing in the band, in the orchestra. And I remember standing there looking, and I said, "That's Mr. Welch. That's my band director. He's playing the trumpet," And I remember going back to school on that Monday or whatever it was and saying, I saw you. And he was like, "Yeah, it's just another gig, kind of thing,
Yeah.
But, those are the things. We used to go see Parliament. We'd see Earth, Wind and Fire. It was all of those groups that our neighborhood people would kind of get, my buddies and I would gather together and go do. We'd save our money, and do it.
Did you ever meet like any baseball players, like any famous baseball players?
Yeah. I don't know if he was famous, but my neighbor, the guy who lived across the street from our house on 8th Street, he lived in a 2-story house. His name was Albert Frazier. He played with the Jacksonville Redcaps, which was the Jacksonville's Negro League baseball team. And I did not know as a kid, that he played Negro League baseball. I knew that my favorite baseball players were Hank Aaron and Willie Mays. And I knew about the Negro League, and I knew about Satchel Paige and Josh Gibson. And I became sort of a student of Josh Gibson, who hit more home runs professionally than anyone else in baseball history, right? Wow. So I was reading this book, and I was thumbing through the pages, and I saw it was an encyclopedia of Negro League baseball, and I saw the name Albert Frazier, and it said Jacksonville Redcaps. And I said, that can't be Mr. Albert, So I left this was when I was in my 30s. I left my office and I drove over to the old neighborhood, and I knocked on his door, and he was an older gentleman at the time. And I said, Mr. Albert, I was reading this book, and I think I saw your name in it. Said you played for the Redcaps, you played in the Negro League. And he had a really deep baritone voice, and he just started laughing. He said, "Ha, ha, ha, ha. Man, that was a long time ago." And I said, I gotta know. You gotta tell me everything I need, So he let me in, and he started telling me about all of my favorite Negro League baseball players and other baseball players like Hank Aaron and Willie Mays and Jackie Robinson. He started telling me about Satchel Paige. He was telling me about all of these players. And I said, all of this history was across the street from me all of that time. And I didn't know it, And I used to play with his nieces. They used to come over during the summer, and we would sit out on the porch and, and talk and everything and laugh. But I had no idea that the man carried so much history.
That's crazy. Wow.
Yeah.
So, did you ever sneak into a ball? Like
the game?
A game? Yeah.
Not not a ball game, but my buddies and I, there was Jacksonville's first, from my knowledge, professional football team was the Jacksonville Sharks. They played at the old Gator Bowl, but they used to practice up at Merrill Avenue Ballpark, J.P. Small Park. And one of my friend's parents, arranged for us to sell programs at their games at the Gator Bowl. And so we would go out there and sell these programs, but we would always sneak into their practices. and kind of sort of got to know the players and everything. And at the time, Jacksonville was so far away from having a professional team like the Jaguars. It was never a thought, until like 5-6 years later when we all got cold fever. But we used to, sneak into the practice and they would sort of run us off, kind of thing. But those were. It was pretty exciting about that. But there was a lot of things going on in Durkeeville at the time. It was kind of like a hub for a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
J.P. Small Park, they used to be youth baseball sponsored by the Villa Sportsman Club. And you weren't anybody unless you played for the Villa Sportsman Club. All the guys, that was a badge of honor. And they had these burgundy and gold baseball uniforms. I just remember that. And those guys were like, and some of these guys are still friends of mine today. And they tell these stories about playing on that team, those teams and everything. And they used to just strut around, with those uniforms on. I was like, man, that was cool.
Flexing, so
Yeah,
flexing
yeah,
on
they were flexing, yeah. But so it was a lot of activity going on and a lot of opportunity for us to do things. And high school football games went on up there that we would, you sneak into. I don't even know if you would call it that, because you'd always find a way to. This is going on in my backyard, right? I'm supposed to be.
You're supposed to be there.
The point, exactly.
Yeah.
Right.
Did you know any famous people like Ray Charles?
I know. I've met several people as a result of my working at WJCT. I worked at WJCT in the 80s. When they and I sort of volunteered for them afterwards, but in the 80s they started the Jacksonville Jazz Festival. It originated. It was called the Mayport Jazz Festival because they did it out in Mayport. But when I worked there, I worked in the art department, and I would sort of also work in production, and I just wanted to be a part of the Jazz Festival, so I was a staff photographer. They let me be a staff photographer, and I would go out and take pictures in black and white. And the story that the most significant story regarding meeting people at the Jazz Festival, because I met all of our headline artists. If they were there, I met them, like Buddy Rich and Dizzy Gillespie and George Benson, Ella Fitzgerald. If they were performing at the Jazz Festival, I'd always make my way to the green room and just kind of lean against the wall and figure out a way to introduce myself to them.
So they would notice you?
So they would, because I probably weren't supposed to be in the green room at the time, but, I had a badge, right? I could go anywhere. So
you're like, hey, yo, I work here.
That's right. But the most significant meeting I ever had was with Miles Davis. Miles Davis was very cantankerous. This guy was always not in the best mood. If he was coming to do his show, it was during a time when his music had changed significantly, and he was there, but he wasn't very friendly to a lot of people. And they asked me if I would, go into, because he was supposed to be doing an interview with this magazine, and he wasn't really, participating, right? So they asked me if I would go in and kind of assist. I'm just a guy on the crew, right? I'm just a guy. So I actually went in there, and he didn't say anything to me, and I really didn't say anything. I didn't try to say anything to him. I think I was more like a calming force. So fast forward to when he comes out on stage. At the time, I was the photographer because they cleared the front of the stage of all the other photographers. So no media was allowed. Only the staff photographer was allowed, and that was me. There was another staff photographer, but he was out in the crowd taking pictures. And so I'm stage right, looking up with my lens, my camera, and Miles Davis. If you do a little research, you'll find out that Miles Davis, towards the end, he used to perform with his back to the stage a lot. So he's coming out, and he's facing the drummer, and he's got his horns hitting these one or two notes at a time. and he's slowly walking towards me. I mean, probably took, I don't know, 10 minutes. And I'm standing at the edge of the stage, and he gets all the way out to the edge of the stage, and he bends down and puts the bell of his horn in the lens of my camera, and I'm aiming up, and he looked around the edge of his horn, and he said, "Take the picture," like that, And I almost dropped the camera. I was just fumbling and everything, and I was snapping pictures and everything, and I managed to squeeze off one or two good pictures. But I think that he did that as a reward for, the way, he and our interactions in the green room.
Yeah.
So, but, so I always appreciated that moment, and I managed to capture that on film. And later I actually painted a picture to commemorate that moment. So, yeah.
That's so beautiful.
Yeah.
That's actually really nice. How much has Durkeeville changed, like, in your opinion?
It's changed. It's changed a lot aesthetically, but I think the character's still there. I ride through often, especially to get a look at the house that I grew up in. The public housing that was there when I was a child was completely torn down and rebuilt into a different project, which is better, right? And I remember when they built Emmett Reed. I was a kid there when they built Emmett Reed and put the pool in. But the character is still there, right? So some of the houses maybe, I don't want to say dilapidated, but needed repair. But I think the character of the community is still there, but the sort of the bedrock of that community is J.P. Small Park. That is as a beautiful diamond that has so much historical value, so many stories of so many things that have happened and occurred in that space. And every time I get a chance to go in there, I feel I feel like I've been transformed back into the past, and I can see activities and things happening within that venue, and knowing that Hank Aaron played there, and that so many people like came through, performed, and I remember high school football games that were there. I have a god brother who attended Ed White, but he went to Eugene Butler first, and Butler and Stanton used to play up there. So it's a lot of tradition there, and I would think one of the few places where that has so much history still remaining in Jacksonville. So the character of the community is still there.
The liveliness.
Yeah. That whole strip from Kings Road to MLK Parkway used to be very much activated. Doctors, teachers, nurses, were living in those houses between 9th and 13th, and it was a beautiful thing. I mean, it just was. My aunt still lives in Durkeeville, and she actually moved back from New York to take care of our uncle. He was in his 80s when he passed away about 10 years ago. So, but my aunt lives there now, and she's in her 80s. So they live in that house, and that house has been there for a long time. It's maintained well, and whenever I go over there to visit, I feel the history of that community.
This is separate from what we're supposed to ask you.
Okay.
But were there like a whole bunch of kids that like just ran around? Like, like if y'all ever just had a free day on Saturday, would you just automatically go outside and just see like a whole lot of kids like some kids like that you didn't even know, like from other houses? Like, would everybody just be on there doing their own thing?
Absolutely. I mean, Saturdays were a big deal. Weekends were a big deal. Saturdays were, we get our cartoons in the morning, and the next thing you know, people will start to appear outside.
Yeah.
We would play, depending on what season it was, we'd play football in the streets, tackle on the grass, touch on the pavement, right? the kids would come from blocks. You'd see, everybody knew each other. If you live 3 or 4 blocks away, we still knew you. We knew what school you attended. We probably saw you at school because we attended the same school. We were walkers. So, yeah, I mean, it was like that. The streets were filled. It was safe. You had adults that may not have been your parent, but you had to obey them, right? So if you were misbehaving, you were out in the street and you were misbehaving, Miss Johnson from 2 houses down would come out and say, I heard you. I know your mama wouldn't want you talking like that, right?
Yeah, don't want to get a whooping by your friend mama.
Right. Or she's going to tell your mom, and your mom is going to believe her, and she's going to address you accordingly. She's going to deal with you, right? So, the community and the camaraderie of the community meant that that people looked out for each other in a way that kept communities together. So
basically, like, everyone knew each other, so it didn't matter if you got yelled at by your neighbor because you guys were a village. Everybody knew each other. Exactly.
And you knew as kids, you knew who you could play like that, right? Yeah. You knew, if I'm down here, Miss Evans, she might not say nothing if we. But
like when y'all know y'all supposed that y'all ain't doing something, like, well, we do this in front of that person's house, she ain't gonna say nothing.
Right. And all the kind of stuff is happening. And you mentioned Saturdays. Oh my goodness, the summertime when we were out of school, that's all we did was play outside all day. And we wouldn't go. We would go to our friend's house, but not likely go inside. Like I mentioned earlier, if you got thirsty, you grab that water hose on the side of anybody's house, turn it on, and keep it moving.
Well, this is going to be the last question. What is your best memory of Durkeeville, like when you were a kid?
I would say my best memory would be being with my friends. I think we looked out for each other. We taught each other. Everybody had good character, right? You might have done some bad things from time to time, but you had good character. And you looked out for each other. Exactly. Right? I know we had one guy who his grades weren't that good, and we used to mess with him about that. You mess with him about his grades, but ready to help him, right? Ready to help him. And so I can't think of anyone during my era from my neighborhood, because I had guys that were 1 year older than me and guys that were 1 year younger than me. So from that era, everybody moved on to become the best they could be. So you didn't have any problems like you worrying about violence and impacts of violence and things like that. People just sort of
it's chill. Y'all just all did y'all own thing.
We felt supported. One parent would hey, I think y'all want to go to the pool? We'd all pile into the car.
Everybody get together, get in the pool.
Right. But we would my friend's father would take us to Hendricks Avenue, where the pool had just recently been integrated. And we would go over there and swim in their pool just because.
We can.
Just because.
Because we can, right. And then, when you had Jefferson Street, you had Emmett Reed on our side as well. But, we went to the pool over there too, let them know. Because we could.
Let them know.
Yeah. And we did all this stuff together.
All I got to do is let them know.
Yeah, just go and play my little
we did all these things together.
Well, I think this was a wonderful podcast. I'm glad that me and Tabitha could interview you about our new thing with Durkeeville.
Great.
And I'm very excited to, look into the future about different things. And I'm very happy that we got to talk to you about the rich history of Durkeeville.
Yeah. Do you have any socials or contact information you want to leave in case someone wants to
look you up.
Look
or-
you up.
Yeah,
you know?
I'm not really a social guy, but I do have a Facebook
Mhm.
thingy, right? Account.
Yeah.
Account.
Yeah, it's Charles L. Griggs, and then I only do Twitter because I'm kind of a news guy.
Yeah.
So it's at Charles L. Griggs, but I don't have an Instagram. Sorry.
That's
Yeah,
perfect.
see, of course.
Right, but I appreciate the time, and I think it is. I'm really encouraged that you all want to know more about Durkeeville and about the past, and you should listen to some funk music sometime. Get you some Parliament in your life.
Yeah, so I'm so happy you came out, and
Me too.
have a nice day.
Thank you.